Masechet Gittin Daf Yod Chet. We're talking about the requirement to have a date written in the get. And this is for two reasons. Number one, so that we don't cover up a possible adultery. If a woman committed adultery and then the husband wants to protect her, like, if it's his niece, so he can always write a get afterwards. And if there's no date in it, then they'll say, oh, see, she was okay. So we need a date to know if when she was slept with this other person, was it after the get, in that which case that's fine, or was it before the get, in which case it was adultery. So we need the date to know which one it is, and we don't use an undated get or one with a wrong date to falsely protect an adulteress. The other reason is because of produce. When a woman has land that she brings into the marriage, the husband takes the produce while they're married from the time of their divorce, then she gets it back. So she's going to want to claim, hey, that's my produce, I want to get it back. From what date? Well, we need to write the date in the get so that the Bet Din will know when he stopped deserving to get the produce and when she can start collecting it back. Good. So now we have a question. Amar le Abaye le Rav Yosef, Shelosha gitin pesulin v'im niset havalad kasher. Ma ha'oilu chachamim b'takanatam. Abaye is quoting a Mishnah from later on Daf Pe Vav that says there are three types of gitin that are not valid, but bidi avad, if she got a get like this and she went ahead and got married, with it, the child will not be a mamzer, so the get works somewhat, but not fully. And it brings three examples for our purpose. This is one of them. Yesh alav edim ve'en bo zman. There's no date in it. And so what we see here is that even if you don't write a date, so the get is still valid. So then what's the point of the Chachamim? The Chachamim are the ones that said, hey, make sure to write a date for either of those two reasons. But if you don't do it, then it's okay. So what's the point of making a takana where it's not binding? Because if you don't do it, then you're still fine. It's like saying, hey, you have to pay the meter. If you don't pay the meter, nothing happens. Well, what's the point of saying you have to pay the meter? So the answer is, Rav Yosef's answer, ahanu de lechatechila lo tinaseh. It works. Lechatechila, she will not be able to get married. If she gets a get without a date, and then she goes on a date and finds a second guy and wants to get married, so they're going to go to the rabbi. They're going to say, let me see the get. And there's no date on here. I'm not marrying you, right? The guy's going to say, no, I'm not going to marry you. This is a get that we cannot use lechatechila. So this is a problem. She's going to have to go back. Hey, give me a get with a date. So therefore, it's going to make life harder for her. So she should not get married. She also herself should not go and get married with after receiving a get without a date. Therefore, the judges, when they are there issuing the get, and the sofer who's writing the get are not going to want to write it without a date. And the husband says, no, don't put a date. And says, we have to put a date because otherwise she won't be able to get remarried. So they're going to demand to put a date. So that's going to make it much harder. It's true. Bidi avad. If somehow he finds a sofer that's willing to not put a date, and he finds and the girl finds someone who is willing to get married without the date on the get to marry her afterwards. Yeah, b'diavad. Then they have a child. The child will not be a mamzer. But still, this will be something preventative. So the rabbi's takana has a lot of effect. Good. Gazier lizman didev yahaben nihala. Second case, what if the husband, he knows this, he has a hard time getting anyone to write a get without a date. So here's what he does. He tells the sofer, okay, put this date, and then he takes scissors and he cuts the date out right out of the document and gives it to her. What about in that case? Mai? And so Rav Yosef answered that question. Says, the get would still be valid, right? And it's true. Someone could theoretically do that, but we don't worry about people being such a deceiver, right? People, there are deceivers out there, but people generally are not so deceptive deceptive, to be so obvious, to actually see a hole right on the top of the get where the date would be. This is like above and beyond. Even deceivers are more careful than that, so you don't have to worry about it. We recently received a letter from a student explaining that why they were late and they shouldn't be marked late, and it was obvious that it was written by ChatGPT because it said student's name in brackets. Right? They didn't even bother to check if it actually has their name, and half the letter didn't even apply to their situation. So yeah, you can use ChatGPT. You can make up something, you can deceive, but you're not going to be that obvious that there's a hole in the document, right? Fill in date here. So nobody would do that. Therefore, we don't have to worry about such a case. Okay, Katuba Shavua Shana Chodesh Shabbat Mai Amale Kasher. Another question: if let's say someone writes a date, well, but they don't write the precise day. They write which 7-year cycle we're in. Right? We're currently in, this the 100th year, 7th year cycle since creation, whatever the 800th. Cycle, or you write the year. You write the year only, but you don't write the month, or write the month only, or you write the week that we're in, but not the day. So you put a more general date. Right, we're in the month of Sivan, but you don't write what day or when this week. So then you don't know what day. What about that? Is that okay? He says, yes, that's kosher. That get is still kosher, even though you didn't write the precise day. So we ask again, then what's the point? The rabbi said put a day, but you're putting such a wide range, so you're still going to have a problem with the produce and the covering up for marriages. So Rav Yosef answers, okay, whatever it is, it will help, even if you write which 7-year cycle you're in. So that will help to know, it was written in this 7-year cycle, and so if the produce from the previous 7-year cycle, if the one after, at least we'll know to that extent. I mean, that's a big margin, but better than nothing. After all, even if you write the day, how do you know the day? What about the morning? What about the evening? What if it's a case of she committed adultery in the middle of the day, and so, but now it says she got the get on that same day. Well, when? Did she get the get in the morning? Did she get the get in the afternoon? And so even if you write the precise day, it doesn't have the precise time. You put the hour, it doesn't have the minute, doesn't have the second. So ela liomad de kame, liomad de batre, hacha name ahane leshavua de kame ul shavua de batre. Rather, even when you put a day, we put the day so we know it was this day and not the one before and not the one after. But within the day, you're right, there might be some imprecision. But that's okay. We'll figure it out. Better to have some precision than zero. And so too, there's no precise limit of the how precise we have to be. And even if it's a month or a year or it's even a 7-year cycle, at least we'll know. Oh, if it turns out we find out she committed adultery some 10 years ago, but we know that the get was within this 7-year period. Okay, so then we'll know if it was before or after. Better than having no date at all. And so the Chachamim's takana still helps somewhat. Amar l'Ravina l'Rava ketaveh bechiste. So next question is that Ravina asks Rava, what if a husband has a get written and he puts it in his pocket and he's not decided yet whether he's going to use it or not. He's waiting to see when he comes home if his wife is going to apologize and appease him, then he'll remain married. But if she's in a bad mood, then he will give her a get. So he puts it in his pocket, and it may be that a while before he decides whether he's going to give it or not. He wants to have it in his pocket as backup. As soon as she says something that he doesn't like, he'll give the get, and maybe that will be several days later. What do you say about that? It's kosher, right? But now the date in it will not be a correct date. So, what are you going to say about that case? Rabba said, this is an unusual case. People don't hasten calamity upon themselves. All right, this is a bad thing to get divorced. Even when you have to do it, it's still not something that you're looking forward to. And so people are not going to rush to say, oh, give me a get. Rather, they're going to say, no, maybe we don't need it. At the last minute, if you see where you really need it, then he'll write it on the spot, right? And we apply this this advice in many cases, like when Tisha B'Av is on Shabbat, we don't make it earlier on Friday because we don't want to bring calamity earlier. Rather, we push it off to Sunday. So yeah, it could be bad. Something bad's going to happen, but there's no need to make it happen faster. We always want to delay it, and therefore, a person is not going to write a get before he decides for sure that he's going to get divorced. Amar le Ravina le Rav Asher, Gittin b'midatayam demi kateve בניסן, ולמה תועד תשרה? מה הועילו חכמים בתקנתם? אמר להנו כלה יתלהו. And the last question in this series, if a get comes from overseas, the husband is writing it in Rome, and he sends it to Israel, and it's going to make it's going to take 6 months. Written in Nisan, it's not going to get here till Tishrei. The date in it is Nisan, and so now, but it doesn't take effect. She's not divorced until the delivery, when it gets into her hands. And so that is going to be in Tishrei. So here you have a get with a wrong date in it. So what's the point of putting a date when it could travel from far? And the answer is, no, a get like that has public knowledge about it. Everybody knows the situation. Oh, she got divorced. Wasn't he in Rome? Yeah, remember, who brought it? How long did it take? It took 6 months. Everybody will know that this get traveled far, and therefore they'll know that the date on it is not going to be the same date that it was given. And so they'll be able to figure out and calculate, and it won't be used to trick the court about covering up adultery, and won't be used to extract produce that wasn't supposed to be produced, because everybody will know that they'll have to adjust for the date for the travel time. All right, good. Itmar, me matay monin leget. Next question, also related to the date of a get, is the law that a woman has to wait 3 months after getting divorced in order to remarry, because just in case she's pregnant, we want to know the paternity of the child. So once 3 months pass, we'll know if she is pregnant. Then if she's pregnant at 3 months, then we'll know that was from her husband, her previous husband. Whereas if she is not pregnant, then she could get married, and then any child she has after that we'll know is from her second husband. Okay, so that's the law. And now the question is, from what date do we start counting? Rav says from the date that it's given, and Shmuel says from the day that it's written. And we just saw there's many cases where the date that it's written may be different, but maybe earlier, and maybe it's not given until days or even months later. So this is the machloket. Now, we have a challenge. Matkif la Rav Natan bar Hoshaya. Just to explain, Rav seems to make a lot of sense, because you want them to be divorced, and then you know that she was not with the husband, and so right, she'll wait 3 months from the time that she's actually divorced. But Shemuel, what about the kitiva? That also does make some sense, because from the moment that the husband writes the get, he's not supposed to be with his wife, because he decided in his mind already, I am going to divorce her. So once he decided that, basically they're separated and should not have relations. So really, they're not having relations we can assume, from the time of the writing of the get. And therefore, let's say that's many months earlier, so then by the time it's given, we know that they were not together. So then that would be okay. This is a very interesting concept, that they are not allowed to be together from the time of the writing of the get, because basically you see there's 2 steps for Gittin. The first step is when he's writing it would be equal to separation, and they're prohibited from each other, meaning the woman is now not allowed to be with anybody else, but also not allowed to be with her husband. And the actual giving it, then she becomes permitted to marry anyone else in the world. So this 2 steps of ending the marriage parallels 2 steps in creating the marriage, because when you create the marriage, also you have a woman who can marry anybody. Anybody she's permitted to marry. Then at the time of Kiddushin, he gives her a ring, and she becomes prohibited to everyone all other people, and prohibited still to her husband, to her future husband, right? So she is mikudeshet, off limits, and off the market, but not yet permitted to be with her husband until nisuin, and then she's permitted to her husband. So just like there you have a woman who is permitted to everyone, then prohibited to everyone at kiddushin, then at nisuin she's permitted only to her husband. So too, when he writes the get, they decide they're going to get divorced, then she is prohibited to be with anyone, not even her husband. And then when she gets the get, she was once again permitted to everybody else. Okay, so that would explain the reasoning of Shemuel. Now, a challenge against Shemuel. Matkif larav Natan bar Hoshaya li Shmuel. Yomru shte nashim b'chasar echad. Zo asura v'zo muteret. According to Shemuel, where you don't go by the date of the giving of the divorce, you might have two women who happen to live in the same courtyard, and they receive a get on the same day. Maybe they're married to the same guy, or maybe to different people. But the point is, they both served their get on the very same day. But one of the Gittin was written a month earlier than the other one. So you're going to have a situation where one woman can go get remarried and the other one cannot get remarried, even though they received their divorce on the same day. Does that make sense? Amar le'Abaye, Zoz man gita mochiach aleha vezoz man gita mochiach aleha. And Abaye says, yes, it does make sense, right? This one has a get, has a date in it, and the date is past 3 months. And the other one has a date on it, and the date is not past 3 months. So yes, it does make a difference when it was written, and we can explain that readily as we just did. Tanya kevate de Rav, Tanya kevate de Shmuel. Each of these Amoraim has a braita that they can use for support. Tanya kevate de Rav, השולח גט לאשתו ונשתהה שליח בדרך 3 חודשים, כשהגיע גט לידה צריכה להמתין 3 חודשים. If you have a messenger bringing a get from the husband to the wife, and it took him a long time. He had to do things on the way, and it took him 3 months by the time he got to the wife. Once he delivers it, she still has to wait another 3 months. You see, it goes by the time of delivery, not by the time of its writing. Ul get yashan en chosheshin share lo nityached imah. And we don't have to worry about a get yashan, a very important concept. A get yashan means a get that was written, and then the husband and wife were together, were secluded together after it was written, and then it was given. That's no good, right? Once a get is written, as we said, they're not allowed to have relations. If they do have relations, it shows that the husband changed his mind. And, I guess he doesn't want to divorce her anymore, right? Because if he wanted to divorce her, he wouldn't have relations with her. And therefore, that makes the get that he wrote unusable, right? Invalid. And if he gives that get afterwards, it's no good. So in this case, we say we don't worry about a get being a get yashan, even though there was a long time between the writing and the giving, because there was no yichud. They were living in different places. They were not secluded. They did not have relations. And so we don't have to worry about that. Tanya kevate de Shmuel is also braita that supports Shmuel. Hamashlish get liishto. A husband writes a get and gives it to a third party. V'amar lo al titenehu la ela lachar shelosha chodashim. And he says, listen, you hold on to it. Don't give it to her before 3 months. Maybe he's going away on a trip and he's not sure. He's going on a dangerous journey. He's going to the army. And so he says, listen, don't give it to her yet. Maybe I'll come back and I don't want you to give it. But if you don't see me for 3 months, then I want her to be free. And so then give it to her. So mishenatnula, mishenetanola, muteret linaseh miyad. Ulget yashan en choshim share lo nityached imah. So after 3 months, he gives it to her, and she can marry immediately. She doesn't have to wait at all, even though she just received it, because we're followed. This is the same as the opinion of Shemuel, that we follow the date that it was written. And here also, we don't have to worry about it being a get yashan. We don't have to worry that the husband and wife had relations between the writing and the giving of the get, because he was away. and so they were not secluded. Good. Rav Kahana, Rav Papi, Rav Asher Abdi Mishaat Ketiba. And now, even though we just saw two opinions, so these three sages, they did from the time of the writing, like Shemuel, Rav Papa, Rav Huna, Bered, Rav Yehoshua, Abdi Mishat Netina, and these other three did it from the time of the giving, like Rav Hilcheta Mishat Ketiva, and the halacha is we do it from the time of the writing, which is helpful to the woman and makes sense because they're not allowed to have relations. She's not going to get pregnant from the first husband, and so we can count all that time as part of the 3 months. All right, good. Itmar, Ematai Ketubah Mishametet. Now another issue that has to do with dates, but now this time is going to be regarding the ketubah. And when does the payment of the ketubah get canceled by shemitah? In the shemitah year, at the end of it, all loans get canceled. Okay, so now does that apply to a ketubah? It does not apply to a ketubah while let's say they're still married. Hopefully a couple will be married for many decades and through many shemitot. Okay, so the shemitah is not going to cancel the ketubah obligation because that is only a theoretical obligation, right? It's there in the ketubah. Should they get divorced or should the husband die, then this payment will come into effect. But right now it's not in effect, and shemitah only cancels a loan, not a contractual obligation. Okay, so what's the answer? Rav Amar Meshetifgom V'tizkof. Ushmuel Amar Pagma Afapi Shelo Zakva Afapi Shelo Pagma. Oh, so rather it's like this: they get divorced at some point, right in the 5th year. And she doesn't necessarily collect the ketubah right away. She may not want to collect the ketubah right away. She can wait, and she'll get sustenance from the inheritance, and she doesn't need the lump sum payment right now, and she'll take it sometime later. So Rav and Shemuel agree that as long as she didn't collect any of the ketubah, so it's not a loan yet, it's still a contractual obligation, and if they go right through shemitah, she can still collect it later. It does not cancel. However, let's say she does start collecting it. So Rav says, once she starts collecting a partial payment, let's say the full ketubah is $100,000, and the husband says, okay, I'm going to give you $10,000 now. Now this is before shemitah, and the rest of it is going to be a loan, right? And here's a loan contract, a loan document that I'm going to be payable in installments every year from now until for $10,000 a year until it's paid, and it makes it a loan. Well, at that point, it switches from being a ketubah, contractual obligation, to turning into a regular loan, right? Because now she already got partial payment, and they set the terms of the rest of the loan, and in that case, shemitah will cancel it as it cancels any other loan. A woman, if she still wants to be able to collect it, will have to write a pidos bull. Shemuel, however, says, no, you don't need both, one or the other. If she already received partial payment, even though they didn't set up the rest of it as a loan, so that shows that's no longer a ketubah, theoretical obligation. She already started getting payment. The rest is owed to her. It's already called a loan. Or even if she got $0 from it, once they decide, okay, where this is going to be payable, and here, I'm going to pay you by this date, this is how much, so then it also turns into a loan. And even if she didn't start collecting it, once it turns into a loan, then shemitah will cancel it. So that's the machloket Rav and Shemuel. And just like in the previous source, Rav and Shemuel each had a baraita that they relied on. So to here, we have a baraita to support both. Tanya kivate de Rav, Tanya kivate de Shemuel. Tanya kivate de Rav, v'matay ketubah meshametet, meshitivskof, v'metifgom, v'tizkof. Braita says, when does a ketubah when is it cancelable by shemitah? When tifkom, like pigam. Pigam means when you make a blemish, right? You take something whole and you make a hole in it, and then it's pigam. So too here there's the ketubah, big payment, and she gets part of it. That's pigam. And she also, the rest of it, they arrange to be a loan, has to be both. Pagma velo zakva, zakva velo pagma, ena mishameta dat shetiskov v'tifkom v'tiskov. But according to Rav, if you did only one or the other, then it's still considered, okay, you got part of it, but the rest of it is still a ketubah contractual obligation, right? Or if I got nothing out of it, I didn't get anything yet, so then it's still called a ketubah contractual obligation, as not yet called a loan. Tanya Kevat Shmuel Ones Uknas Ufitui Ktubat Isha שזה כפן במלווה משמטין ואם לאו אין משמטין. ממתי נזקפים מלווה משעת העמדה בדין. Shmuel has a braita that supports him, and this braita talks about other types of payments, like a payment to a woman who is raped. Or kenas, if a husband falsely accuses his bride of not being a betula, and it turns out to be false, mosi shemra, so he has to pay. And pitui, someone seduces a girl, so there's a payment there, similar to the rape payment. And ketubat isha, that's the one that we need. All these, since they are fines, so while they're still just a theoretical fine, right? He committed this offense, or he got married and has to pay the ketubah. These are actually similar because they're all based on sure having betulim or not. Even the fine is instead of the ketubah payment that she will be able to get when she gets married, because he raped her. Now she is not a betula anymore, so he has to pay for that difference. Okay, so these are all related payments. So as long as he did something, so now he is responsible to pay it. But just being responsible to pay it doesn't still make it's still just a contractual or legal obligation. It doesn't yet turn into a loan. However, once you turn it into a loan, then the sabbatical year will cancel it, right? We turn it into a loan. You go and you write a loan document. You go to court. The court says, okay, you have to pay this amount. When are you going to pay it? So then it becomes a loan. V'im lav and mishametin. But if it's not turned into a loan, then shemitah will not cancel it. And when does it turn into a loan? Mishat hamada badin, when it stands trial. So before that, even though he committed this crime, let's say the rape case, and he is obligated to pay a fine, but until the court comes and says, you're guilty, you have to pay this much, and turn it into a actual payable responsibility, until then it's not considered a loan, and it will not cancel. All right, Amar Shemuel, Ketubah k'maaseh beit din damya. Ma maaseh beit din נכתבים ביום ונכתבים בלילה, אף כתובה נכתבת ביום ונחתמת בלילה. Shemuel rules that a ketubah is the same as a court order. What's a court order? So generally, a court will decide a case. They'll issue a verdict, right? This person is guilty. Now, right when they issue the verdict, and that's in writing, already the guilty party's land is going to be leaned towards the payment, even though they haven't issued the court order yet. There's two stages, the verdict and the court order. So once the verdict is signed, you are guilty, so already his land is leaned. At some point later, maybe a few days later, they'll actually write a court order. Here, you have to pay this amount. Therefore, if the court order has a wrong date on it, that's okay, because the problem with the wrong date, generally in financial documents, is that someone will be able to collect from liened property earlier than they should. So if it's a loan document, if the loan is today, it has to have today's date on it. If you write an earlier date, then you're going to come and collect money from land that actually wasn't liened yet at the time of the loan. But for a court order, that's okay, because it goes by the time of the verdict, then you could go check the date of the verdict. So Shemuel says that ketubah is the same thing. Just like a court order can be written during the day and put with a date of the daytime, and then signed at night, which is technically the next calendar day, and that's okay. Even though it's predated, that's all fine, because they were already obligated to pay from the time of the verdict. So too a ketubah is the same law. It can be written during the day and signed at night. Why? because the obligation of the ketubah kicks in at the time of nisuin, right? Independent of when the ketubah was signed. So therefore, let's say they write the ketubah. They write out the ketubah, they put the date on it in the daytime, and they also do the nisuin in the daytime. But for some reason, they don't get around to signing it until the nighttime. So it was not signed on the same day it was written. That's okay, because the obligation and the lien on the property of the husband kicks in at the daytime during the nisuim, which is in fact the date that's also written on it, and so that's permitted. And we have a real case. Ketubate de Rabbi Chiya bar Rav, ichtu bayom v'echtum balayla. Hava Rav hatam v'la amad lehu v'la midi. That was the opinion of Shemuel. But now we have an actual case regarding Rav. The ketubah of Rabbi Chiya, the son of Rav, it was his own son. It was written during the day, but they did not sign it until the nighttime. Rav was there, and he didn't say anything. So apparently, Rav seems to agree. Lema kishmuel sevira le. Wait, does that mean that Rav agrees with Shemuel? Not necessarily. Asukin beoto inyan havu. That case was different because they were involved in writing the ketubah the entire time. They started during the day at 4 o'clock, and they were discussing and negotiating and evaluating, and they wrote it and made a mistake and had to write it again and all that. And it took until the nighttime, but they were continuously involved in the discussion. The edim were there the whole time. So in that case, that's why it was fine. The Tanya Amar Rabbi Elazar bar Rabbi Sadok lo shanu ela kishen asukin boto inyan aval asukin boto inyan kasher. When we said there's a problem of writing a ketubah in the daytime and signing it at night, that's only when they wrote it. They went and did something else, and then they came back and signed it. That's no good. But if they were involved the entire day, so it's all considered one continuous period, and then that get would be permitted. All right, now back to the Mishnah, where Rabbi Shimon Machshir. Rabbi Shimon said if it was written during the day and signed at night, that's okay. Rabbi Shimon was okay with that. Amar Rava, my tamad Rabbi Shimon. Why? Kasavar kevan shenatan einav legarsha shuv and lo perot. Because we're following the reason that the reason that you need a date in the get in the first place is that we should know when the produce goes from the husband collecting it back to the wife collecting from her own land. And Rabbi Shimon also thinks that once a husband decides to divorce his wife, he doesn't deserve the produce anymore. The produce is there while they are happily married, and so from the time that he decides to write to divorce his wife and write the get, he already doesn't deserve perot, and therefore the date that's written in the get is the correct date. That's when he should stop getting perot. And it really doesn't matter when he actually gives the get, right? Because the produce follows the writing and not the giving. Amar Resh Lakish, lo chshir Rabbi Shimon ela le'altar. Ava mikan v'ad asara yamim lo. Resh Lakish limits Rabbi Shimon's opinion to a case where it's signed immediately, right? It's written during the day, and that night it was signed, so there's only a short time in between. But if it's going to be from now until 10 days from now, it's written now, and then it's not given until 10 days from now, even Rabbi Shimon would, and it's not signed until 10 days from now, even Rabbi Shimon would not agree that that is valid, because Hashinan Shema PS, we say maybe the husband decided to appease his wife in the meantime, right? They made up, and if they made up and they had relations together, then the get that he wrote is going to be a get yashan and invalid for use. And so then we worry, it's such a long time in between. Maybe he wrote it while he was upset. He decided he's going to divorce her. Then they got back together, they had relations. Then he got upset again and said, okay, now I'm really divorcing her, and then signed and gave that get in the meantime, but that makes the original get no good because they made up in the middle. Rabbi Yochanan amar afilu mekan v'ad asara yamim v'init tedefiyas kala it le'lemilata. Rabbi Yochanan, however, disagrees with Resh Lakish, and he interprets Rabbi Shimon to say that even if it was written now and not signed and given until 10 days from now, that's still okay. Why don't you worry that maybe they made up and had relations? Because if they made up, it would be public knowledge. Everybody knows, oh, did you see them? Oh, they were together. They look so happy together again. And so they would know that. And therefore, they would say, "Wait, when was it written? It was written before this. Look at the date." But I remember that they were together again after that date, so people would know and make sure to rectify the situation, and it won't be a problem. Okay, Itmar, Amar la'asara kitvu get li'ishti. The last topic for today is a man says to 10 people, write a get for my wife. There's 10 people in the room. Write a get for my wife. Amar Rabbi Yochanan shenai mishum adim v'chulam mishum tenai. V'resh Lakish amar kulam mishum adim. So we're going to see that it's talking about a case where he says kulchem. All of you, I want you all to be involved in writing the get. Why does he want 10 people there? Apparently he wants to embarrass his wife in public. Maybe she did something really terrible, like she burnt the soup, and there's 10 people there. She says, "See, I'm divorcing you," and everybody's watching here, right? So that everybody knows how badly you burnt the soup. Okay, whatever reason, he wants 10 people to be there. And Rabbi Yochanan says, what will be their role? You only need 2 people to be witnesses, not all 10. So 2 people will be witnesses, and the others will also sign it just to fulfill his condition. Right? A husband can make a condition. You are divorced on condition that whatever. So his condition is on condition that everyone else signs it. And Resh Lakish said, no, if he said all of you write the get, you all have to be involved. They all have to be involved as witnesses. They all have to be kosher witnesses. Okay, so that's the machloket. Let's analyze. Hechidameh. Now, even though in the original statement it says he said write, there's 10 people there, and he said all of you, he said you write a get, but he didn't say all of you. So if he didn't say all of you, then it would not be, the other people would not be required to do anything. He just meant among you 10, take care of writing the get. So then you'd need 1 person to write, if you know whoever knows how to write, and 2 people would sign, and that's it. The other 7 don't need to do anything, because he meant by that, by not saying kulchem, he said someone here take care of it. However, if he said kulchem, all of you, kitvu get lishti, then everybody has to be involved, and everybody has to do something, and everybody has to sign. Now, my benaihu, what will be a practical difference between the two amoraim? Ika benaihu de hatum betere minaihu beyomeh v'ina mikan v'ad asara yamim. Here would be a difference if 2 signed today, and the other 8 signed many days later. Manda mamshum tenai kasher. Rabbi Yochanan, who said that really only 2 have to sign as witnesses. The others have to sign just to fulfill the stipulation, but they're not valid witnesses. So then this get would be kosher because 2 signed on the day it was written. So it was written and signed on the same day. That's Rabbanan, right? We don't follow Rabbi Shimon generally, who says you can write it and sign it on different days. We follow Rabbanan. It has to be written and signed on the same day. It was written and signed by 2 witnesses on the same day. That's good. And the other ones, they're not witnesses. They're just signing to fulfill stipulation, so they can sign a different day. Whereas Resh Lakish said he's commanding all of them to sign as kosher witnesses. In that case, they all have to sign on the same day it was written. And if some of them sign afterwards, it's no good. Iname, kegon shenimsa echad mehen karov o pasul. Leman damar mishum tenai kasher, leman damar mishum adim pasul. What if some of them, right, out of the 10, there's 3 of them who are relatives or are invalid witnesses, a gambler? So if you say that they have to sign just as a condition, Rabbi Yochanan, then it's fine. As long as there's 2 kosher, unrelated witnesses signed on it, so they act as witnesses, and everybody else are just extra signatures to fulfill the Tanai. But according to Resh Lakish, that says all of them have to be kosher witnesses. If any one of them is invalid or related, the get would be no good. Now, within the Rabbi Yochanan, we have a discussion. What if the first couple of people who signed were relatives or gamblers? So then what do we say? Some say it's kosher, and some say the get is no good. Why? Amri le kasher tenaihu. So some say it's kosher because we'll say those witnesses are just on condition. Even though they signed first, we'll say, okay, those are not real signatures. Those are just for fun. for the condition, and the ones that signed number 5 and 6, those are kosher guys. Okay, those we'll consider the witnesses. So it doesn't matter the order. But others, amdi le pasul ate lachlufe b'shtarot alma. The people who say it's no good is because this is going to be very confusing. If someone sees and says, "Oh, look, signatures number 1 and number 2 are gamblers. Oh, I guess gamblers are allowed to sign." And then when they make a different document in other circumstances, normal circumstances, they're going to think that such a shtar is valid, even though it is not valid. And so, therefore, would say, no, the first 2 witnesses have to be kosher witnesses. Afterwards, if non-kosher people sign, then it'll be clear that these are just add-ons. Now we have a story of a guy who said to 10 people, Kitvu get le'ishti, and he means all of you write a get for my wife. Chatum be tere minayhu beyomeh v'inach mikad v'ad 10 yamim. And they, for some reason, 2 of them signed on that day that was written, and the other people came and signed a few days later. Ata lekamed Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. So I asked Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, what should we do about this? He says, we can rely on Rabbi Shimon in extenuating circumstances. Okay, what we're going to do now is we have to calibrate. We saw many different opinions just now, but we have to calibrate in who could we follow in order for this to be kosher. So Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says, it is kosher because I'm going to follow Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon who said, you can write it on one day and sign it on a different day, and it's still kosher. And here was signed on, 2 of them signed on one day, but the rest signed on a different day. We'll rely on Rabbi Shimon. It was a shat hadachak. Maybe she already got married and had kids. We don't want to have mamzerim. Okay, so now let's analyze who exactly is Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi following. Resh Lakish's interpretation of Rabbi Shimon was that Rabbi Shimon only allows it to be written in a day and signed at night, right? Just within a few hours. But if it's a few days later, then it's not allowed. And so even Rabbi Shimon would not agree to that. Okay, so Bahi could be Yochanan Sibir Aleh. Rather, it must be that Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi is following Rabbi Yochanan's interpretation of Rabbi Shimon, who allows something to be written now and signed even many days later. Hold on, V'hamar Rabbi Yochanan. If you're going to follow Rabbi Yochanan, he said, Shanai mishum edim v'kolam mishum tenai. He said that you can have 2 signed today, and the other 8 they can sign many days later, and you don't need, therefore, to follow Rabbi Shimon. According to Rabbi Yochanan, as long as 2 are signing today, Rabbanan would say it's totally fine, and because all you need is 2, and the rest have to sign only as to fulfill the condition, not as kosher witnesses. So why didn't he just say, I'm following Rabbi Yochanan? No, Bahi Keresh Lakish Vidaleh. In that regard, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi agreed with Resh Lakish. So it turns out, Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, he's a colleague of Rabbi Yochanan. In fact, Rabbi Yochanan is somewhat younger than Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. So Rabbi Yoshua, he has his own opinion, and he decided that I agree with Resh Lakish when it comes to the other 8 witnesses. They have to actually act as witnesses. They have to be kosher, and therefore they're going to have to sign it on the same day. However, he also happened to agree with Rabbi Yochanan's interpretation of Rabbi Shimon, and therefore he said, listen, we can rely on Rabbi Shimon b'shat hadachak, and Rabbi Shimon would allow it even if it's written several days later. So that's why he followed that path to permit it, even though actually, if you would have asked Rabbi Yochanan himself, Rabbi Yochanan would have found another path to permit it, that 2 are on one day, on the right day, and it doesn't matter regarding the other 8. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.